Agency, we got another episode of Church for Atheists. I have Maven from When We Choose here on the program. I've been talking for a while about we need to get Maven on this channel because Maven's got some good thoughts, and we just spent a little time talking about some things, and we had a plan. But I think more importantly, right now, it's time to kind of pass the mic, somewhat, and have a conversation here because maybe you have something on you have some ideas in your heart that
Yeah,
need to be expressed, I think. So Maven, how are you, first of all?
I'm doing okay. I've been better, but I'm okay considering the week I've had, which I won't go into here, but behind the scenes a little bit. But yeah, I'm doing okay, and I will be okay. We'll say that.
Good. Yeah, say that. And I think it's true. I think you're strong. You've been through a lot overall, and so
Yeah.
it can feel like a lot though, especially around the holidays, I feel. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I can go ahead and jump in on or at least trying to put to words what's been on my mind.
Mhm.
It's basically or essentially male allyship in feminism and reproductive rights, just anything for women, because I'm finding um I guess I used to see it in more black and white that there's either allies or not, and I'm finding now, and it's very sad to me that a lot of seeming allies on the male side of things aren't really all there. I've been disappointed by a lot of people that I thought were understood things, I guess, or understood the gravity, and I don't know, and part of me, I understand it does take a lot to learn and really unlearn in some of these spaces, but I also find that um I mean, besides being disappointed in the level of allyship that's out there, it seems that a lot of men just aren't aware. So they think they're allies. When I'm saying I'm disappointed in an ally, it's not that they were pretending. They they genuinely think like they've got it figured out, like equality, they're on our side. They don't think women should be home making sandwiches barefoot and pregnant. They believe in us having jobs in the workplace and stuff, but there's just so much more. And so I guess I don't know, it's just disappointing to me when I get again they don't really fully show up where I feel like we need them to. And then the other thing is I'm finding out that on the other side of things, there's a lot of men who are not allies and they know it, but they are learning to hold that back when it comes to women in their lives because they don't want to. They know they'll be corrected. I think they've got women, either their wives or their mothers or their sisters or maybe the person they date. They know that if they say what they really think, that they're going to come back on them on that, and so they just keep it to themselves. But they still will pretend to be on board with things. It's in usually all male spaces that the misogyny and the sexism comes out. So those are the thoughts that are on my mind. And I can give, I guess, an example if it helps the audience, if you think it'll help, of I guess a non-ally, I would say a sexist from Mormonism. um, Basically how they pretend to be pro-woman, and then when the mask falls off, and then also allies, when I guess the mask falls off on allies who really think they're allies but just still don't quite understand. Does that make sense?
Yes,
So
absolutely. Yeah, I think you just encapsulated very well, Maven. I know that was very nerve-wracking for you, but I think you did it. I think you said exactly what needed to be said there, and I think it's an important topic. I've actually thought a lot about this, including recently myself. We'll just say things plainly. I can't endorse political candidates or parties or unendorse them necessarily, but I can speak to moral crisis and the morals, because as the first herald of the Church of Cohort. But I feel like I've said before that we are in moral crisis in this country right now, and women have been reacting to it, because so much of the misogyny that they're experiencing, since the outcome of the 2024 election, um, is exposing men that they thought they were safe around, and
yeah.
and I've And I feel like that's what you're speaking about. And I've been thinking about that too, because I'm like, here's the thing. I said this to Britt Hartley in my episode with her a couple weeks ago, or I guess that just came out earlier this week, um, about how, um, I was a part of that toxicity. And for the most part, I didn't realize it, but I didn't realize how much I did realize it. And I think that's going on with a lot of men. And part of that is, I think in their minds, in the minds of toxic people, toxic men specifically, they think, well, they let us get away with it. They let me get away with it, which is such a gatekeeper mentality, right? The women are responsible for keeping me in check so that I am not, so that their mind controls my mind and calls me out, because I can always rely on the women in my life to call me out, which is so not the case. Never mind the fact that it's dangerous in many cases for women to call out men, even if they're not physically in danger. It's, there's that danger, right? But of course, I'm mansplaining something to you, very well. But
there is always like a feeling of risk, and of disappointment. And I honestly find that whenever I try to point things out, and it's like across the board, whether it's, people that I know are not allies and really don't want to be, and trying to point out misogyny to them, to the ones who are, I I hate so much, like there's just so much pushback. It seems like nobody wants to listen to me point it out. And I think maybe there's some ego in that they don't like being called out, especially if they feel that they're an ally. Then I think the call out hurts worse and they push against it more. But they end up doing the same thing, where instead of like being on board and being an ally, or learning and taking it and like moving forward with us, like it just, everything has to halt, and then I have to like explain, and it's on me to, I guess, teach and prove and like debate now, prove why it is that they're not helping, or what they're saying isn't helpful. And it's like I have to prove that there's a problem. And it's just like I hate it so much, because again, it's so disappointing coming from people who think they're allies, because it just makes me think like we're so behind. We're so behind when there's such big things that are huge problems, but you allies are making me waste my time telling you that there's a problem. It's just, let me give an example so that maybe like people know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So this is like somebody I know that, again, they consider themselves leftist. They voted for Harris. They consider themselves feminist. They equality across the board, all this kind of stuff. And when, I talked to them initially after the election, this conversation that we had started off, very, comforting. And they said, I'm sure you're disappointed, as am I, about the outcome of the election. And I'm sorry. And yeah, and that's great, right? That's a great start. So I said yes. And then as we started going, I can't remember where like things really started to go off the rails, but I started feeling just this kind of like budding anxiety. And this person has never had anything to do with Mormonism. So I'll say that, right? Not Exmo, but just, never Mormon. And grew up in a pretty like more or less progressive area, not in like a super conservative area. Okay. And so they don't have that baggage. But still, I ended up towards the end of the conversation feeling just like I did in Mormonism, trying to tell any Mormon man something about my experience, and then just being, well, actually, and, but is it really a problem? And just feeling just so little, and just like everything I'm saying being questioned again, just like they just can't listen and take it in. It's just like, anyway, so this is what happened with this man, because he said, when I was talking about the growing misogyny and just like how much scarier it's getting, he said something like, well, I mean, like we basically have equality. And I was like, what? No, we don't. And he was just like, well, but I mean, on the books we do. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, in the law, like there aren't any laws that are specifically sexist. And I was just like, well, the abortion one, like, and he's like, yeah, well, but that's different, because that's just, only women can get pregnant. So it's, and I'm just like, no, that does not make it different. Like this is a level of control being exerted over women because they're women, because they can bear children. Like, that is part of it. And then he was like, okay, well, besides that. And so then again, like, it was just so frustrating because, like, just because something is in black and white, and like, I never go through my life thinking about what's in the law books. Nobody does that. Nobody thinks about these things at all. And so just I there's misogyny there, that when you have to pull something really random like that, name anything else in your life, or I wonder if he could for his life, where he's just like, okay, but on the law books, like, this is, and there's no racism or whatever. It's just like, it doesn't matter what's in the law. What matters is what's happening in reality. And it doesn't, the only thing similar is actually from the Denmark episode that I just recently did with Mormon Stories podcast about the Faith, Hope, Rape documentary. We got the journalist on for that. His name is Michael Teschel. And this was also in Nevermo, he said one of the things that members would do with him a lot when he would ask them questions about abuse and cover-ups is that they would, hold up their church handbook basically and say, like, look, see, it's in our handbook. We're against abuse. And he's like, and I don't know why it was confusing why they keep bringing that up, because it doesn't change anything about what's happening.
Right.
And so I feel like that's the same thing here. It's just, anyway, and that's why it was so frustrating, because like I said, I just felt kind of belittled and not believed when because I wasn't, because I'm saying that, like, there's no equality, and he's saying, well, but there is. Like, prove to me that there isn't. It's not in the law. And so then, like, it shouldn't be on me to have to point out, especially when things are really subtle, when it's like, when men are keeping things back from us, or, again, pretending to be allies when we're not. I don't think this guy's pretending, like I said, because at the end of the conversation, I said, I think I got a little bit snarky, but I just needed to leave because I was getting really, really worked up. And so I was like, look, if I wanted to be talked down to, like, I'd still be Mormon. And then I left, and he was shocked, like, the look on his face. He was like, I'm trying to say, like, I'm here for you. Like, I get why you're upset, but I was just done. I like basically almost had to run away from the conversation because it was so bad. And and again, it's these kinds of things that, like, I know he was shocked. I believe him. I absolutely believe him. But, when you're saying stuff like that, and you're just like, that the law's okay, though, it's just, it doesn't make a
Oh,
difference.
there you go.
Yeah.
It's like, are you even going to pat me on my head while you try and talk down to me, right?
Yeah.
It's like, come on, guy. I mean, if I'm hearing you right, Maven, and you feel free to correct me on this, it feels like there's this need in you to say, if I have to react and enforce this, you're being aware of the misogyny, it's already too late to fix it. And that's why I feel like a lot of women are feeling that way since November, right? That there's this, you hear these stories about women who they I don't know if maybe you have or haven't heard this, but like on the discussion boards on the internet, there are all these right-wing men. I'm trying to use very political language here, without going into politics, who are depressed and talking about, my girlfriend dumped me, or my fiance dumped me, my wife threw me out of the house because because she's like, I can't believe Trump won, who votes for this guy? And then he's like, well, I voted for him, and she didn't know. And then suddenly he's like, and she totally flew off the handle. I knew I couldn't, she didn't want, I figured she didn't want to hear it. She didn't want me to tell her. It's like, she didn't want you to not tell her that you were voting for Trump. She wanted you to not vote for Trump because, obviously
you cared about her, like, and you understood, like, the risks of the, like, just that you voted for somebody who was a misogynist and a rapist and child molester allegedly, and who, like, is a threat to our rights, and has already took some from us, is responsible for ones that we just lost. Like, the fact that men don't see that it's a big deal, it's just heartbreaking for me, honestly.
Yeah, I think there's this toxicity inside of me. I've seen it happen, right? And with other men, definitely I see it a lot. And now that I know to look for it, I see it. Is that there's this idea that says, oh, she just doesn't want to be around that right now. She can't handle the environment. She can't. So I'm just not going to say it. I'm just going to keep it back. But the difference between that, between, oh, I'm just not going to say anything that's going to hurt your feelings, and keeping a secret, is next to nothing. I mean, it's nothing really. At the end of the day, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
I feel like
especially,
they think we're wrong. I feel like a lot of men think that we're overreacting, that it's not a big deal. Um, in this conversation that I just mentioned, one of the things he was talking about was like there's checks and balances, and these things kind of work out. And that just seemed really flippant to me because, for one, like the checks and balances are getting systemically dismantled right now. The rights that were taking from us with the Dobbs decision, that was not done democratically at all. It was done against the will of the majority of the people, and yet we're powerless to stop it. So it just seemed really flippant. And again, I think that's why they think it's not a problem, or they can wait it out because they can. They're not the ones whose lives are on the line in the meantime for that to happen. So
mhm.
I do feel like a lot of men feel like, oh, I understand that you're sad, but like it's just not a big deal to them. I think even if they know they're right, but I don't know. I think they think we're overreacting, and we're making it a bigger deal than it is. And I think that's ultimately what it is. They don't believe us, and they think we're just being emotional about it.
Mm. Or and there is something to say, I think, and I'm curious what you think about this, about validation, right? That sometimes validation is being used as a way of fronting, as being
Yeah.
performative,
It
right?
seems
It's
almost,
like,
yeah, placating, like, yeah, I get it. And
yeah,
maybe
it's
they
like,
do, but
oh,
like they don't really get it. They understand on the surface. Yeah. Um,
right. That it becomes, I hear what you're saying, but said as, oh, I get what you're saying, and I agree with you. As opposed to having the courage to stand, having the courage to say I disagree, and B, the courage and the self-awareness to be able to say, maybe I'm wrong about this, or maybe I didn't realize this, and to listen to women. I feel like I've been hearing this for decades. I feel like I've been hearing this my whole life. Women saying, listen to women, hear
yeah.
women. And we go, right, good for you. Yeah, no, cool. Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, and then you walk away, or it's like, okay, I'm hearing your words, but that's not what it means. Listen to women means, listen, you're probably, you as a man, because you're in a position of privilege, which is a thing that a lot of men can't acknowledge and can't address, and nobody's holding them to account for it, so they don't, which because frankly we get lazy. And you say, because your privilege allows you to not listen to what they're saying, to what a woman is saying, and to at least walk, and to just walk away from it,
Yeah.
or to at least hear the words, that you don't become you don't become at all self-aware. And then men figure, well, if I didn't get punished for it, then I'm going to get away with it.
Yeah.
And that's a position of privilege. I don't think that's a moral question of men versus women.
Yeah.
It just happens to come out that way because men are the privileged ones in
And
society.
I feel like men are really used to privileging their own opinion about everything. And so when they listen, it's like I'm hearing the words that the women are speaking, I'm understanding them, but I'm still coming away with my judgment instead of like really giving it to them that they're analyzing this right, that they've got their finger, on the button here. And so that's kind of what I feel like I'm seeing is this, yeah, women are upset and they're worried about these things, but I'm not,
Hmm.
and again, and there was somebody, this is again a different story. There was somebody that I had told about, why I had become, after the Dobbs decision, made the decision to sterilize myself. And at one point they said, wow, that seems extreme. And it was so frustrating because it's like it's not extreme, like it's like if you and again it just seems so diminishing. It seems like what am I, this hysterical woman that just like made this really big decision about my body, that extreme, like it's just it kind of adds into this idea that like women are extreme with their bodies and we can't trust them, and this is the whole reason why we've got to legislate them, because we can't trust them to make decisions about their reproductive system because they're just unhinged, and it's just, you know, again, it's just another disappointment where it's just like, how can you say that when, when I'm explaining to you what it is that I'm looking at and the risks, and I just don't want to take it, and it's this, you know what I mean?
Yep.
I don't know, it hurts. It hurts when men just can't just take us seriously, I guess. So I think what I'm hearing is like men, when they want to try to listen, they're listening, but they're not seeing us as stating facts. They're seeing us as stating feelings. And so that's why it's like, oh, I need to comfort them because this is a feelings thing, and not like this is a a facts thing. Like comfort is nice, but it's not going to change anything at all. What needs to change is like society at large. And really really show up for it, I think. And I think so many men, um even allies, I think, around other men are afraid to speak up around
Mm.
them.
Yeah. And to say, and to be honest, and to, and to ask questions and to affirm things. Is like, you just said something here. You just admitted to something. I'm not admitted to something. You just shared something that's very personal about your decision to be sterilized.
Mm-hmm.
And my initial reaction was, my gosh, what a dangerous procedure to go through. This is really important to you. You are really, you've made a very difficult decision. And so I just want to say, before I say anything else, that like, I respect you for for having the courage, Maven, to not only do this thing that, of course, you feel you have to do, but to go through, frankly, a life-threatening thing, and and to be able to be vulnerable with people about it. That takes a lot.
I want to push back on life threatening. I guess, like, I mean, in a way that any procedure can be, but if um it's actually it's an in and out kind of procedure. So when you put it that way, I don't want women who are thinking about it to be scared. It's a laparoscopic thing. It's actually pretty routine. It's a
Oh.
little bit more complicated than a vasectomy, but not that much more. So I want to put that out there. But it is a decision that, like, you make, to go through with this action, to talk to the doctor, to talk about, the pros and cons and all the options, and then make an informed decision. And I do wish that men could at least give me that benefit of the doubt, that I have had the information and I made the best choice for me based on information, rather than just thinking, oh, I just made an extreme decision. Because I think that's also the part that's missing. Men forget, or don't seem to think that we've really thought about things, or that we've looked into any other options or considered any other option. And that's how they can be invalidating too, because they might start asking, well, what about this? Well, what about this? Why'd you do that? Well, did you consider this? And it just kind of comes across as really demeaning, as like, did you think about anything else before you just went with this? And it's like, of course I did. Of course, it's my body. I had to. And this is a really permanent thing I'm doing. So
Yeah.
absolutely, and so yeah, I think, I don't know. It's just, I know for sure it's baked into Mormonism that just women aren't really, like, really, really listened to unless you like what they're saying. Then they're all happy to listen to us. But when they disagree, they're just like, I disagree, and therefore I'm right and they're wrong, because that's just the default.
Mm. It's interesting for me, what you're saying there, because I feel like I'm hearing in your experience, and it's something that I've been seeing and hearing from other people, from other women, is that they want to be visible as women, and at the same time just make a decision to say to men, oh, can you please just see me as a human being, see me as a
Yeah.
woman, but see me as a human being first,
Right.
and think about you as a human being. It's not that hard, and
Right.
that's what I think is frustrating for when it comes to male toxicity. A lot of this is not that hard. It's like,
Yeah.
imagine if your body made babies. Okay, it just get your head around that. Not that hard. And then, and men's bodies do make babies in a way, but in
Right.
a way that's a lot less risky, that's a lot less transformative to their future. I mean, and that you don't have to think about it. And it's like, okay, can you see? Because that's what I'm hearing with what you're saying is like, you are a human being. You wouldn't make a decision like this, guy, without thinking about what it would mean to your future. Why are
Right.
you talking to me as a woman who is
Hmm.
not a human? Being a woman is being human too.
It's almost like I'm being like a child. really.
Sure. That makes sense to
And
me.
I think
I
too,
mean,
men don't
it's awful.
realize like how much more privileged their, not just their voices, but also like their pain and their experiences are than with women. Because again, another thing, like I'm seeing a lot of pushback whenever you try to bring up problems with, that are with women as far as like violence or rights or things like that, that there's this pushback. Well, what about men too? What about male suicide rates? And it's just like, that's again, in both scenarios, like these are things that men are doing. Men are putting violence against us and they're doing it to themselves. It's like that, it's not the same thing. This is not two sides of the same coin. Well, but a lot of times like the root of it is the same, because it's a lot of this toxic masculinity in patriarchy that prevents them from being able to actually talk with male friends, have the kind of emotional connection that women are allowed to have. Like these are the things that actually lead to their suicides or loneliness, because less and less women are willing to be treated like second class citizens. And if you're not willing to change how you view women, it's harder, you're going to be lonely. And so it's still, again, it's just like, that's not women doing this to you. This is still you doing this to women, and you doing this to yourself. Or this is so common. Joe, I see this so much. Again, and these are in ally spaces. Like it, and it happens when, I mean, and I've done this the whole time. I've said men. I've just said it really generically. And I know that I don't mean you, but at no point have you been like, well, Maven, but not me, right? And I appreciate that, because that's what I'm seeing a lot of. It's the not all men, or someone will come in a feminist forum and just be like, you guys kind of say like mean things on the internet. You're kind of angry. Like, do you think that maybe part of the problem is this anger? And maybe if you were a little nicer, a little bit more neutral, do and it's just so infuriating, because it's just like, first of all, it's like men want a pat on the back, and they're upset that they're not getting one. It's just like, we're focusing on this problem, which is caused primarily by men, but you want to say, wait, but not me. I get a gold star, don't I? Like, stop the discourse and give me some praise right now for not being one of those guys, and it's just like, no, just don't be one of those guys, and just be with the group, and like keep going with the group thing. Why do we got to stop? And but then also it's just this, like, you being mean. This happened on another Mormon stories episode. A guy came in. It was is Mormon feminism dead? And this person came in right away with like, well, what about misandry? And so people were asking him, like, what about it? And the examples he gave were like, when women on the internet say like all men are scum. And it's just like, we are looking at loss of rights. We're looking at loss of reproductive freedom to make decisions for our body and also our families. We are looking at like disparities in pay. We're looking at a lot of harassment, a lot of violence, domestic abuse, sexual assault, on and on and on and on, up to homicide. And you're mad that women on the internet are mad and call men scum. Like, the level, but he thinks it's equal. He's bringing this into this discussion, like this systemic oppression of women. But women called me scum, and I don't like it. So like, why don't you guys ever talk about the misandry? And it's just like, you are not hurt by women saying scum on the internet. You are okay, and it's
Right.
just, it's sad. But so that guy, he definitely not an ally. But even in the ally spaces, I would say it regularly comes up every couple months. In a forum, a man will come in. He'll give his feminist credentials. I was raised by women. I admire a lot of women in my life, but like, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I don't belong in this space because you guys are angry, or you're mean, or you're not saying like, not all men. And it's just like, I don't know what to tell you. Being nice has
Mm.
never gotten us anything, ever. If anything, it appeases men and makes them think that they can keep doing what they're doing. They've never voluntarily given us the vote, or given us, rights to own property, or rights to have our own bank account. Like, everything has to be a fight. So no, like, there is no can, just say please.
Mm. And do you think that? So, I mean, I hear here that something that's interesting to me is this perspective that um, women, if women are being perceived as just quote unquote just being angry, it immediately illegitimizes the fact that they are human beings, in my opinion, because no
Mhm.
man would assume he doesn't have a right to be angry. And it's like, why shouldn't she have a right to be angry? It's like, oh, they're being angry. That doesn't tell us anything. If she's angry, maybe she has a right. She has a right to be angry, and maybe she has a reason to be angry, which should cause you to think, to reflect, and say, did I make you angry? Right. Like I'm listening to you right now. Okay, and like you said, I certainly hope I did not at any point do, not me though, right, Maven? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm Joe. I'm one of the good ones, right? I try not to do that, and I try, but I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking in my head, am I wrong? Am I wrong? Am I missing something here? What am I learning from Maven? What am I actually getting from this? Because it's like, I think a lot of times when we listen to people, we just wait for them to finish, and so we can just respond. And like I'm sitting and active listening is a skill that most people need to learn, but men especially need to learn, and especially when they interact with women, because it no, they've never been in, we weren't in a position to do it, right? And so yeah, and so like you say,
I want to know,
it,
like, why do you think you're not saying, but what about me, Maven? Not me. You're saying all men, but you're not saying all men except you. Does that
why
go
do
through
I
your
feel
mind? Like, do you feel like you're being personally blamed if I just say men generically? What's happening with you? Do
I
you think it's different?
mhm. I don't think it's different. Well, okay. So I don't think that it occurs to me differently than it does to any other man. I like I do all my life. I've done that. Okay, wait a second. I'll start in my head. I'm likely to want to start an argument, right? And to
Okay.
say, okay, well let's bring up this counterpoint over here, right? And that occurs to me, and I let it happen, and naturally occurs to me. And a part of it, I acknowledge and say, I I am being called out. How am I not being called out?
Okay.
And then the other side of it says, and then the way I internally try to react to it is, okay, well maybe I need to change my mind about something. Maybe I need to hear what I'm not, what I don't understand, and
Okay. So
hear.
it's not that you don't think the same way, but that you actively, I guess, kind of maybe hold back the urge to start correcting or being like, but not me, or maybe you guys are kind of mean, like you just you hold that back. Am I hearing you right?
I I try, yeah, I'd say I challenge myself inside and think about privilege. It's the way I normally do it. I do it with any marginalized group. I try to look at it. Had a lot of conversations recently with trans people and gay people and so forth, who are both marginalized groups. People of color. I've had several conversations. Well, offline. And no, people are like, when did we have conversations with people of color? Well, I did have one, I guess, with Sam Nieves. But I think about it, and I think I am a white, arguably cis het, arguably male, arguably, who's never had to justify any of those aspects of my character to other people, and listening to somebody who does have to justify themselves to other people all the time. And so I'm like, and so if when I'm actively listening, challenging to myself, I think I'm definitely missing something here. This person's telling me something I need to know. And so that's a skill, in an internal skill. And part of that is there is my I have to resist the urge to do the attaboys. Yeah. Oh, good job, Joe. Good job being not a toxic male. Okay. And I feel that too. And I'm like, oh boy, are you gonna do the attaboys? Don't do that. Not now. Not now. We're listening, right? Because it can actually get to a point where, for men, I feel, me as a man, where I can become so distracted by the performativeness, by being an ally and look at me, and proud of myself, that it can be so distracting that I don't hear what this person is trying to tell me, and I don't make any decisions on how do I need to change my perspective. What did this person just actually tell me that was valuable? So that's why sometimes I'll do something like, okay, Maven, what you just said this to me, and this is what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah.
Like you like that part just a moment ago where I said, about I'm hearing that you don't feel like you're being treated like a human being. I hear you trying to say to men, think of me as a human being as well as think of me as a woman. Don't just attribute the stereotypes of women to me. And so it's like I'm not trying to do that just to be performative, or at least I sure hope I'm not. I'm trying to actually verbalize, and so other people can hear it, and so that I can hear it and say out loud, okay, maybe I don't treat women like they're human beings and don't realize it because I give myself these attaboys and say, "Oh, good job, Exmo Joe, Mister pro feminist guy," and I give myself the attaboys and then walk away and from that conversation. And so that's part of how I try to correct it, is to say, let's verbalize it out loud so I'm hearing you, and so that I know that I'm getting it right, because otherwise I'll just assume, and it's like, and oftentimes I get that wrong, and I do the wrong thing. So
So
I guess I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I'm just having a thought, like, so I've started to watch and follow more female creators, persons of color, and so, like, on YouTube, but just a lot more channels, especially Black women. Um, and there'll be a lot of comments. Maybe the creators themselves don't say stuff like this, but it's very, very much there in the atmosphere, I think. Other Black women saying things, especially with this election, they really showed up and they voted for Kamala. They voted for Harris, and white women, I mean, we failed. We failed. And so I'll see that a lot. They'll say things, white women this, white women that. White women, they pretend to be allies. It's very similar. That's why there's intersectionality here. But they'll drop us for their man, or they'll drop us to serve themselves, or whatever. And when I see those kinds of comments, like, I feel sad, but I also don't take it personally. I mean, and I don't know, I just don't feel the need at all to go in and say, but I voted for Harris. I'm not one of those white women. I'm here, you know. I just, I don't know. I just don't even think that way. I just take it in, and because they're right, and it's not on me to get them to validate my experience as a white woman, to validate me as a true ally or not. I just feel like it's my duty to show up as an ally, and the things they're saying are true, like, generally speaking, about white women. So I you know I don't know, and I do feel, I guess I do kind of take on some of the responsibility, because yes, I voted for Harris, but um you know I am part of this group, and as a group we do fail at this over and over and over, and it makes me, I'm very sorry that we do.
Yeah,
That's just the end of it for me, but I'm still there. So yeah.
right. I think I hear something there about that white guilt, as people describe it, is just guilt at the end of the day. and
Yeah.
and there are people who feel, who need to feel guilty, not that they are white or we are white, because I am
Right.
arguably white myself, but that we need to be self-aware as human beings, and to be in a position of privilege and to be aware of your privilege is a whole different challenge in and of itself.
Right. That's why I say,
Right.
like, they're not wrong. They're saying these things because they've experienced it. They've experienced it personally. They've been betrayed by white friends, or white women they thought were friends, and they've been betrayed nationally. So I feel like their experience is valid and true. So yeah, so when people want to push back on that, it's almost like, I need you to still give me it, and in particular, an extra chance, even though you have personally done that who knows how many times and been disappointed how many times. I'm not going to go to any Black woman who has resentment for white women and say, but you pay attention to me and see if I deserve that. It's it's not on her. I shouldn't put it on her to give me a chance to, like, break the pattern. She already sees the pattern. and
Mhm.
and maybe I'm different, but, like, it's on me to earn it first rather than trying to get her to give it to me and then lose that trust. And I feel like that's kind of what people are trying to do. They're like, trust me first and then see if I do something to lose it, when it's like, look, we've already lost it so many times and we can't trust everybody. You got to step up rather than starting on the platform and stepping down.
Yeah, interesting. I'm curious. Do you feel like this was a watershed moment with the election, that women are changing and changing tact? Because I mean, that's what it seems to me like I'm hearing that women are saying, if I have to get to the point where I have to do something to get you to change your behavior, it's too late. Like we were saying before, it's like these women who these men are talking about, we never had any problems. No,
Right.
you obviously did have
Yeah.
problems. You just weren't paying attention, right? And so it's like, and so a woman says, okay, I've tried to talk to you. I've tried to get you to open up and share your feelings. I've tried to invite you to tell me what's going on, what you're going to do, and you obviously were holding back on me, right?
Yeah.
There's that feeling that women seem to be expressing, is that you would keep that from me. It's not just that you would vote against my rights, or that you would feel like this group is entitled to take away my rights, but that you felt like you could withhold that information from me. That trust, that broken trust, has come to this place. Get out of my house. Get
Yeah.
out of my life. I don't want to
Well,
see you anymore.
I think part of what happened is first of all, like, our things haven't been on the line as much as they are right now. And so if you, in the past, there's not as much of a difference, as long as it's not affecting your daily life. So if your husband's not on board with you, but you know you still have your job, or just with the reproductive rights, I just thought that, like, it was a given that abortion is legalized, and so it is what it is. And so it didn't matter if someone wanted to be pro-life, because I have my rights, so they can't affect me and they can't affect that. And then there's also this idea, so that's it. I think this things were really on the line. And then also, in a lot of conversations where there's kind of some disagreement, I mean, you don't really end a conversation having decided, like, okay, now that we've both said our piece, which side are we on? Who's come to my side? It just kind of, and the conversations just kind of end, and maybe one person is shifted a little bit. But I feel like a lot of times people just stay where they are, and they're just like, I'm still here though, but they don't say it quite like that. And so I think that, well, two things. One, I think women have been giving men the benefit of the doubt for a very, very long time. So even when there are signs, or even with these disagreements, we are seeing a better person than is actually there. And we think we're seeing the better, like, that is the real person. And that this is the anomaly. Or maybe instead of saying or, we'll say and, that if it did come down to the line and they really did see what was on the wire here and, like, what's at risk, their eyes would open, and they would be with us. They would be on our side. And, like, that's what I thought with my dad. I thought, especially after the death of a pregnant family member, and the Dobbs happened. And then I'm trying to explain to my dad why this is a big deal to me, why this hurts me and my friends, and, like, and the things that I know are going to happen as a result of this, and why I'm scared and angry and frustrated. And it fell on deaf ears. And that was my reality check. For me, it was Dobbs. For a lot of women, it's been it. And the feelings I'm seeing and hearing are the same as I felt. It was just this come to Jesus moment, to use a Turner phrase, where you realize they aren't allies. My dad is not on my side. My dad does not see me as more important than a fetus. He's saying it. He'll say that, but if your life was on the line, but our lives are on the line. The women who are dying the most that of preventable deaths are in these red states with the abortion bans. And that I hear people saying or commenting all the time, like, every state has laws protecting the life of the mother. So it's like, well, so then why are they dying? Why are these rates going up if it's on the law books? Because the reality doesn't match the law books. And so, yeah, it's just like, it's frustrating to realize that, like, if my life were on the line, all my dad has is our words. he can tell that to me as I'm dying, that he thinks that I should be saved. He can tell that to my dead corpse, that he thinks I should be saved. He can say that at my gravestone, that he thought I should have been saved. But at the end of the day, I'm not saved because of the laws that he supports. And so that's like the break moment. I think all of these things kind of came together and made the difference for women. It's just things really were on the line. We thought the men in our lives were with us, and we finally, and we've been giving them the benefit of the doubt this whole time, but then they don't show up for us. So
Yeah, I
that's been
mean,
the breaking point.
it's an interesting thing that I'm hearing from you about this. I've been speaking in my Sunday sermons, well, one Sunday sermon so far, but believe me, there's going to be more, where about how only godless people, frankly, really see problems, see the world as it is. And that's because, for me, because I look at the excuses that get made, because that's what I'm hearing. What you're saying is that there's a lot of these excuses. Oh, well, they have of this, they have of that, this, that. They don't look at the data of what's going on, which is, like you're saying,
Right.
the women who are in danger, the women who are dying, the women who are, having, all these negative, all this harm to their bodies and to their minds and
Right.
to their well-being. And it's like they're not looking at that data because, oh, that's very negative and I don't want to feel that right now, so we're going to go ahead and retreat back over to, oh, here's a convenient excuse, so it's fine. And then they start to say, you hear this phrase, well, everything happens for a reason, God has a plan. And for me, I look at that, I'm like, that just became such an easy cop out over the
Right.
course of our society. God has a plan. God will sort it out. And it's like, first of all, we gotta, even if you believe that's true, which, I can respect anybody who believes that's true, but you gotta not say that. I feel
It
like,
doesn't help anything.
yeah, because, yeah,
It makes
exactly.
it
If
worse,
mhm.
really.
It becomes apathy. It becomes a way to say, I'm not going to do anything about it. I don't have to do anything about it. It's in
Right.
God's hands. Well, am I gonna? Who am I? What am I gonna do? Oh yeah,
But yet
no, I'm gonna.
they'll wear glasses. They'll go to the they'll go to doctor's appointments for everything. They'll put their, to go back to Britt Hartley, and put the seatbelt on in the car. All of these things, but it
Yeah,
just this one area. Then it's yeah.
yeah, I hear. Yeah, that's what I mean, like, I'm sitting here trying to think, man, there are ways that I could be doing this a little bit better. I mean, what could I be doing better to well, let me ask you this question, because I said this before, and I think that I only mentioned it briefly. This is in a recent show. I'm trying to remember which one it was, but I had said this. I said, look, men need other men to talk to them, and I didn't realize this until I started listening more to women, which is, I am ashamed to say, very recently in my life. I'd say probably in the last like 6-7 years, and people said to me, say, oh, we need men to talk to other men about women,
Right.
and so do you feel like that's needing to happen? First of all, of course, we're both, I think, probably very disappointed that that's the case.
Yeah,
Nonetheless,
but
it
it's a
is true.
reality. If
Hmm.
women's voices are already lower and they're not willing to, but they will listen to men, sometimes that's what it takes. And especially if they think like women are just being like overreactive or hysterical about this, but when a man says no, I absolutely would be hysterical if this could happen to me, and not just if I was a woman, but even as a man, if someone were to take this much control over my reproductive system and put that into law, like I'd be pissed. I'd be fucking pissed, and I would not stand for it. Then it just kind of it men need other, like, to hear that from other men for it to click for them. And
Hmm.
honestly, a lot of misogyny is upheld by men. Like I said, in men only groups, they're more emboldened to say things that they would never say in mixed company. And so I feel like it's really in those moments, in those kinds of groups, that things need to be said and pushed back against and spoken up. But there's a decent chance that you will start to be ostracized from those groups as well eventually, if they're not ready to start shifting with you and coming on board, then you'll get the same treatment that the women get, which is don't say this in front of them. They'll get all feminist on you. And it's so, I feel like there's men seek permission from other men specifically not to care about these things sometimes. But if it happens more and more, if more and more men will do it, I think it'll become more common. And these circles where, men go to, uphold themselves and their sexism and their misogyny will get smaller and smaller. That's my hope anyway. But we have a long way to go, I think. Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a way that men could respond to women, to be candid with women, about a disagreement that you have, without being argumentative and dismissive of that woman's position and of her feelings and of her rights as a person?
Right now, I don't know. I don't know that that's possible because it happens so much. It's like I feel questioned all the time and corrected all the time by men that don't know anything about me, or it just, they're so comfortable pushing back and disagreeing on literally everything, that for us everything is a fight. So if you had something legitimate, I don't, I'm just tired, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm tired. um
Yeah.
I'm tired of like having to, and it gets really demoralizing for me, honestly. It's not just that I'm tired and like, or I don't want to take the time for it, but just even when the question comes up sometimes, it could be really genuine. Like, I mean, on a show I did about reproductive rights, I kept saying that this is, abortion bans are misogynistic, and they said several times, like, how is it misogynistic? And it's just like I don't even know what to say when you can't even see something that's so basic, or they'll say like it's not about controlling women, but it's like, but it is. That's literally all it does. That's all these abortion bans do, is like prevent women from doing something that they would be able to do if it weren't for you meddling in and preventing them from doing that. What is control if that's not it? What is it? It's just, I don't get it. And so I think just because you're not holding a woman down and like moving her limbs or something, or making her speak certain words, that's the only way to exert control. Like, there's a lot of ways to exert control, and that's one of them. Like, you're not leaving it to them. You're deciding for them. Anytime you're making a decision for somebody else as an adult who should be able to make a decision for themselves, you're exerting control, which is like, which you can do legally if you say you have a power of attorney or something, like a medical power of attorney. You are taking control of that other person. And what abortion bans do basically is just give the state the right to enforce like a medical power of attorney, as if they can't speak for and decide for it themselves. It is overriding human will of an adult human being who is otherwise capable of acting and deciding for themselves. So I don't know, it just again, that's where it just gets to be where it's just like there's such basic things that people don't see, and it's just hard. It just makes me wonder, like, where, if we can ever get anywhere, and if people don't see that what this does is this really does relegate us to a second class citizenship. It puts, and it's not just pregnant women, because a lot of things affect women just all along the spectrum, because things have, I mean, if you can't get a medicine when you're 12 because you're considered like of childbearing age, and it's a medicine that can affect a fetus, like, you don't have to have one to like have to fight to get that medicine when these things happen. Or if there's travel bans, like, are you pregnant when you're getting pulled over? Maybe not, but does it just takes a police officer to suspect that you are? And if so, like, if he suspects you're crossing a state border to get an illegal abortion, then like he has the right to get a urine sample from you to test if you're pregnant. Like, these are huge violations that are getting set up. It's not just abortion bans. Like, if I'm not pregnant, I shouldn't have to pee in a cup for a cop to go from one state to another just to make sure I'm not, and to make sure I'm not, just, that's horrific. And so it's there's so much that builds up on this. And quite frankly, women overwhelmingly do vote in favor of reproductive freedom. And there are already men who are starting to say that like we shouldn't vote, that this is proof that of radicalization. And it's just like, this is where it's just, it makes us second class citizens. It really does. And they want to deny that. They want to say no, it doesn't. No, and like men and women are equal. You just can't kill a baby, as they put it. But it's like, no, you make us into objects. You make us into reproductive objects, and that's our primary focus before our humanity, and that's problematic.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I
Wow.
like, if you don't want to see it, I don't know. And see, that's the thing too, is it kind of feel like if you don't see it, ultimately that's, I suspect that you don't want to, that you're upholding, this other side of it for a reason. And so it's easier to say, I'm not denying your humanity. I just don't, I don't see that that's what I'm doing at all. And then that way they don't have to deal with it or admit what they're doing.
Hmm. Hmm. And it's interesting. I have an interesting question about that, because what you said about the about basically men don't realize that they're doing it, or that that it's men who are saying it, right? Because there are women also
There are
who
women too,
are
yeah.
internalizing. And well, and what's interesting about that though is the language. But I want to put a finger in that, just because it occurs to me in the moment. Just I want to ask you, okay, and because I need to know. And so, do you? I'm curious, because you've seen some of my interviews, and I've seen you in the comments, and you've been coming in with great comments, and I really appreciate that. I really do. Have you heard me say or do anything misogynistic, or that seems performative, that is occurs to you that you could call me out on?
Not yet.
Okay. Would you? Can I ask you to be candid with me, and feel safe to be candid with me if I
Yeah.
do? Okay, cool. I'm just, I just don't want you. I want to be in a position where I'm kept honest about this, because it's so
I
easy,
appreciate that.
so easy to slip into that privilege. And then it bugs me. I'm like, I don't even
Yeah.
know. Maven could be trying to call me out right now, not feeling safe about it. So I just want you to know that you're safe to call me out. And,
Thank you.
and so, okay. So I was watching Ward Radio. I'm just going to call it out, right? The Ladies of Ward Radio episodes, for me, it's triggering. I wouldn't blame you if you haven't even watched a lot of them. Okay. They have this new thing they've been doing. They say they are a familyist. Have you heard
Oh
this
yeah, I
word?
have seen that.
Ugh. I mean, I just like
I disagree.
nails on a chalkboard.
Right, it is.
Nails on a chalkboard. It's just so bad, so triggering. But they don't even realize it. It's like when everything that follows the word is misogynistic. You can't say. First of all, I thought the first thought is, there's no way this thought originated in the head of a woman. I'm sorry, but I feel that way. I'm like, all of this is, whether they realize it or not, men educating women about what they think about
I can see
feminism,
that.
right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's like,
it's the men in the church who are most upset at feminism, and it makes sense that they would try to come up with something like that. But it's also, I feel like it's also the men that started the like, well, you do have the priesthood here, and you have it in this way, and if you like squint really hard and turn around 3 times, like you could see that you have the priesthood. The men started that, and then the women follow, because that's what you do in misogynistic cultures. Women fall in line with the men and what the men tell us to say. And then, yeah. And that's the only time men want to platform us, is for us to confirm something that they're saying, usually about women, because if we agree with them on anything else, it doesn't matter. They don't need our voice. It's only when it's about female stuff, when people are trying to point out the disparity, that okay, all right, we need to bring the women in, give them a megaphone, and have them repeat our talking points. That's very common. And that's how you be a good woman in these societies, is supporting the men and what they say. But they're not really familyist, because I think, and I'm seeing more and more conservative cultures, that the more loudly they proclaim to be about family, I would say the worse off they are about it. Just, I mean, like the Duggars, like there's just so much rot and just rank abuse in these cultures, from husband to wife, from husband and wife to children. There's a lot of sexual abuse, there's a lot of domestic violence, there's a lot of teen pregnancy, there's a lot of promiscuity, because these things all go together. So as much as they like to have this like holy higher ground, they contribute to like more abortions. It's conservatives who will get more abortions generally, because I mean, first of all, babies are embarrassing, especially if they're out of wedlock. And so that's one way to, you either be a pariah as a single mom forever, which they also make very hard deliberately, because they don't want single mothers to be flourishing with children, because that's against the nuclear family. They want them to struggle so that they can point out the superiority of the nuclear family, you know, with the husband there too. So they deliberately make things difficult. They deliberately gut their education, which we've seen now. Like, the education system has just been completely destroyed now. It has been for a while, and it's going to get worse, a lot worse, before it ever gets better. But I mean, we've got kids, like college kids now, that are almost tech illiterate. They don't know how to send an email message properly. Like, they can just reply to what other people send them. Like, it's insane. And we're starting to see kids be like 8, 9, 10. They can barely read, barely, you know, and it's bad. It's really, really bad. And it's their policies that have done this. They've gutted education. They gut any kind of social program that benefits mothers and children in health, in shelter, in affordable food, just every step of the way, all across the board. Anything that will actually help improve outcomes for families, especially with younger children, they are against, and they vote against. They vote against maternity leave. They vote against paternity leave. They vote against livable wages, you know, and it's yeah, I nobody hurts families more than people who keep calling themselves pro-family or familyist than these conservative cultures. Hands down.
Mhm.
Hands down.
Mhm. I
Yeah.
agree. And it's startling sometimes when you see
Right.
it, when you
And
see it
it's just
all face.
disgusting to me, honestly, that they want to pretend that they're doing this like for children, you know, when it's just like they traffic children, they abuse children. It's just, you know, they don't see children as people. They're extensions of themselves as well, which is, you know, and that's why, like with my channel, when we choose, it's not just about reproductive rights. To me, it's really about bodily autonomy. And so it's reproductive freedom and justice, but also against domestic violence and child abuse, and homicide, because honestly, I think the root is the same for all of these, is that women and children are often in the same category. We are like together harmed. Whatever harms women will harm children more often as well. Whatever effects are happening, you know, homicide and sexual abuse, it's women and children on the receiving end of it the majority of the time, and it's men doing it the majority of the time. There's always some exceptions, you know, but that's the like overwhelming system that we're at right now. And I think it's because of a lack of equality, and it's because the respect for our bodies and, you know, our humanity is not respected.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there is a disproportionality? And I've been talking to you for an hour, and I don't want you to feel like I feel entitled to all of your time. Maven, this has been so far very good, and I realize I'm asking you for more of your time here. So I just want to be
All
I
good.
want to acknowledge
Thank you.
that. Is that I feel like it's, it shouldn't be surprising to men to consider the possibility of speaking to other men in defense of women's ideas, women's feelings, and women's rights as human beings, considering that any man can see women doing it and even encourages, and we often encourage women to do it to each other. And the gaslighting, that's why, like, this ward radio thing is just going to get stuck in my head, because there's this attaboys that go passed around among women sometimes.
Yeah.
Then they say a misogynistic thing, and then affirm it to each other. Oh, thank goodness you said it. I was so looking forward you were going to say it. Oh, I just thought I'd say it. And then they start passing around the atta girls, I guess you could say, they start passing it around, all the gaslighting. And it's like, if you take
Yes.
any of these things out of your mouths and put them on a board, and no person, no human being looking at it wouldn't say that's gaslighting. You're gaslighting women. Don't say that shit. But it's like, because they're women doing it, then it's
Right.
not gaslighting. It's not misogyny. It's like, no, you
No,
are
it
being a
is.
misogynist.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep, it
you're
is.
being.
That's why I say it's internalized misogyny, and that's why, like, what people want to say, like, well, they say they're fine, and you should believe them. Why don't you believe them? This is, you want people to believe you, and the difference is that I can be honest on this side of things. You can't be honest in that culture. You can't be honest and say stuff against the men, because they don't. I mean, you see it right there. If it was okay, they would be doing it, but they're not doing it because it's not okay. So it's just, if honesty was a part of the culture, then they could be believed. It's possible that they really mean it, but I also know, because I've been there, and like hundreds of thousands of women have been there too, that they're hiding it, or they're hiding their true feelings, or suppressing their true feelings to be good women, because that's what we want to be, and that's how we were taught to do it. But those kinds of things happen in conversations off camera as well. If in Relief Society, or in any group of Mormon women, would if you I would say three, if is the minimum, three, but certainly more than that. Once you start kind of saying, like, this doesn't quite seem fair, right? It's because it's thought control, honestly, that's part of
Mhm.
this. When you can start to barely kind of get into these little areas, and then it's the tone police. We'll start policing each other. So we'll say these things are hard, or these things seem unfair, and someone's going to come in and say, well, yeah, but I feel, this is the true church, and this is thing we don't always understand. The gaslighting of ourselves kicks in, the programming kicks in. And if there's three or more women there, at least one will get uncomfortable enough with the fact that we're kind of starting to point out misogyny, even if we're not saying those words, but we're pointing it, we're pushing into like uncomfortable places that, again, our programming, it starts to send off red alerts, like we're kind of going against the brethren. Is that what we're doing? Are we saying things against the men? Okay, well, let's talk about how grateful we are for the men, and grateful we are for the priesthood, and just how, like, what, we're not perfect either. When you think about it, like, it's not like we know everything. It's just, we, blah, blah, blah. They have their roles, we have ours, and blah 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 blah. All the cliches, the thought stopping techniques that happens everywhere
Mhm.
among Mormon women, and I assume the same for other conservative cultures.
Right. No, definitely. I mean, at least I see it, and I see ex-evangelical women, like whether it's on YouTube or listening to their podcast, talking about this. The pretty much the exact same thing going on over there. So,
It's
I
programming. It's what it is. Yeah.
and it's much bigger than Mormonism for sure, and it's much bigger, frankly, than conservative Republicans,
Yeah.
MAGA, whatever that label is. Right? I mean, they're liberal women. I think you've said that, liberal men and liberal women who are doing it too.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, so I have a couple of questions for you, and again, trying to be aware of your time. Um, uh, One is, do you think that there's a way that we can encourage some language that says, instead of confronting and saying, I disagree with you,
Hmm.
could be, you've said a hard thing to me and I want to change and I want to consider it. I don't resonate. It doesn't resonate with me yet. Right. And is there a way to do that so that we can at least have language, a tool that we, between men and women, or between women and men, we can say, look, let's get on the road towards an understanding where you acknowledge your toxicity, and or where I acknowledge my toxicity, and say, okay, I want to change. But you're gonna have to give me some
I
time
don't
here. Be
know,
patient.
honestly. That's the answer. Because I'm really just barely realizing the depth of this as a problem, and seeing it in my interactions. So if there is a solution, I haven't, like, worked enough, or seen enough to figure it out, honestly.
Mm,
And
mm,
so I don't know right
yeah,
now.
right.
I
And
think
well,
if
and right.
someone says something, if you're willing to do the research, you know, afterwards, but I almost, what would be wrong with accepting our position first and then working to either like figure it yourself after, like proving it true or not.
Hmm.
Could we, I
Okay.
guess maybe could we start there? Could we just believe us first until you like find something that disproves that? I guess. I don't know. That's all I've
Okay.
got.
Okay. So instead of, I hear you. I think that's a good. I think that's a great point. Then, so instead of I disagree with you, but and this is hard for me to hear, but I'm willing to at least get on the road towards it. It needs to be. We're already well past that point, is what I'm hearing you saying.
Mm.
We're at the point now where it's like, no, if you're going to say anything to me, if I'm a woman in a situation, if you're going to say anything to me, say first that you believe me, and
Right.
that you
I
see
think
that you're being toxic
you
and
should
you need
assume,
change.
especially when it's coming to like female like rights and discrimination and privileges, you should start out of the gate that we've got to be on what's happening to us and each other and ourselves.
Mm,
Right off the
mm,
bat. It shouldn't be up to us to have to convince you that we've lived enough experiences or this has happened to enough women that we know, or that we see it in TV and online and it just everywhere all the damn time, because like that's just so much to even start with, like to have to, you know, give example here, you know, it's just, and it's everywhere. So I think maybe just like take it for truth that women are, you know, when women are saying, especially a lot, because that is what's happening right now, like it's across the board, women are upset, women are angry, women are scared, women are concerned. So rather than being like, are the women wrong, just the women are right, and put it on you to find out what is it that they're seeing that you're not seeing, what are they
mm,
saying, and then when they bring things up, start looking for it. Look, you know, look online. Are you seeing men come up and say, well, men, you know, women, there's misandry too, women say mean things about men, they call us names, they're, you know, it's, and or not all men, like then you start noticing sometimes, you know, when you hear it, take that in, look for it and see what we're seeing. I guess if you take it in to accept it, maybe that'll be like what it takes to open your eyes to. But when you're just like, no, I want her to prove it to me first before I'll start seeing it, like it shouldn't be on us. And I don't have time in individual conversations to do that. I'm less willing to do that, unless it's going to be again like on a podcast where I at least know that my time like is going to hopefully reach more people. But it's
mhm.
not worth it to me anymore, like in personal conversations, if I could get out of it or help it, it's just a waste because I don't feel like I'm being listened to anyway. So so even if
Mm,
I did like go in and explain, um first of all, I'm not always like ready with stuff off the top of my head, and then yeah, second of all, I don't think they listen.
mm. I hear you. I and it's interesting because I'm hearing you describe that. I started on down a real serious journey of discovering myself, my own toxicity and my own toxic masculinity, which I don't know how you feel about this. I've talked about this with every woman that I've talked to so far. Pretty much, it seems to me, it's like men need to appreciate that toxic masculinity is describing the toxicity, not the masculinity. Because
Right.
most women I know are who hate toxic masculinity, and I hate toxic masculinity, frankly, as a man, I hate toxic masculinity. Is that I say what you got to pay attention to is a lot of these women love masculinity. They love it in that when it's healthy in other
Yeah.
people and in themselves. Like masculinity is not a dude's thing
Right.
only, right? And so, anyways, but it started for me with a comment on Facebook and Kate Kelly's Facebook. Kate Kelly and I don't know that she would consider me a friend. I mean, we've visited, we've talked a few times in person, and I helped her out with a small project, and I was honored that she would ask me to. And And Kate Kelly, those of you at home who don't know this, is an ex-Mormon woman who started and ran Ordained Women. Didn't she start it as well?
I don't know if she started it, but she did end up becoming like the prominent figure of the movement. Yeah, for sure.
Right. So she had posted a comment years ago, the year we were both excommunicated. She and I and John DeLynn, like rapid succession, but nobody knew who I was. But and frankly, most they still don't. But she said something about we need to have a conversation. Both, I think she said, both in Mormon and ex-Mormon cultures about how men put emotional labor on women. And I, brilliant boy that I am, commented on her Facebook page where there were tons of women commenting, yes, thank you. Somebody had to say it. And I got to be the brave boy who jumped into the middle of this conversation with a lot of women and said, what is emotional labor? Mm. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell you this, the punishment was swift and it was effective. And there was this moment where this toxic masculinity in me goes, okay, sorry.
Yeah, you're being mean. Yeah. I was just trying to help. I'm just asking a question. That's right. I'm just asking.
Yeah. Are you going to punish everybody who's trying to learn? I'm just trying to learn, blah, 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 blah. And I was very fortunate to have women in my life and non-man persons in my life who would look at me and say, Joe, are you kidding me right now? Did you really? And I was like, okay. Rather than getting angry.
Explain what's wrong like with asking a question. I could see how people could see like, well, what if I don't know what emotional labor is? What should you have done?
Right. So I have great respect for Kate Kelly for having patience with me on this, because her first response when she saw a few responses to me was, okay, you don't have to, this is a friend of mine. Yeah. She says to these other women, this is a friend of mine. I'll handle this. But then she was very frank with me in her response. But one of the comments that one of these women had to me really sunk into me to go, that's it. That's what I'm missing and don't realize, is she said, you, rather than just going over to a Google window and Googling it, expect a woman to take time out of her day to explain herself to you. And I went,
yep,
shit, you're right. No, you're absolutely right. And so and that's where I looked at it and said, how much privilege do I enjoy and have no idea? Not only because I decide, most of it you don't decide. I mean, privilege isn't something you decide, I'm going to start taking advantage of this. It's something people just let you get away with, oftentimes to the point where you never had to engage with it. That's what I feel like privilege is, right? And so that started me onto this journey of listening to when women are trying to say things to me all the time, and say things to other men all the time, to men in general, and to other women all the time, to cry out. I mean, I hear it since then. I hear women crying out all the time. I'm trying to say something. I'm trying to communicate with you, and you're not hearing me. My own wife, I would suddenly have to start and turn to her and say, and validate and repeat things to her. And oftentimes, and especially at the beginning of this, she would correct me. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I really don't know how to listen to women. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Please be patient with me. I want to understand. Tell it to me again. I'm sorry. And it's like, and then I started to be able to hear the words that mean I'm trying to get through to you. And realize we don't even speak the same language, frankly, men and women in our society. So, anyways, I that's an overshare. I'm an autistic person.
That's good. I had a thought, but I kind of lost it. I was gonna say like about the asking question, what you did, which really was an example of having women like do, I mean, maybe not emotional, but mental labor for you, is that when men do that, and I think that's kind of what I'm saying when I'm saying like they'll dismiss or not believe me anyway, they're putting it on me to prove my point rather than them looking up and understanding and proving it to themselves. But it's almost like and you can correct me or tell me like what your experience is. I think when you do actually take it upon yourself to go and learn, I think it makes more sense and you're more likely to learn from it and see it than rather just hearing a regurgitation from a woman and then judging whether or not um, it's true or not. It's like men ask us to give this to them and do the work for them so that they can basically judge it, almost like a boss getting work from like an employee, like, okay, this is good enough, or no, this is no good and I'm just going to throw it out. I think they'll more likely dismiss it coming from us, even though they're asking us, than if they look it up, and start learning themselves. And the other I did actually also want to point out is that yeah, first of all, it is a lot and it happens all the time, and not just about like female stuff, but even just like work stuff. I had just a moment in one of my jobs that just kind of blew my mind at I was talking about just cabinets, because this happened during COVID, and the office that I worked at just severely like downsized. Everybody got sent home, right? And we started to sublease. So part of my job was to gather all of these file cabinets that were at individual employees' little workstations, and get the keys matched up, because they travel, keys would travel and disappear. And so I was kind of joking around just about how crazy it was. Sometimes I would open a drawer and there would be like three sets of keys in this drawer, to three different cabinets, none of them to the cabinet that I just pulled them out of. And so there's little numbers, there's way to figure out. Anyway, so I'm explaining this, and I'm explaining, and then we've got one that no keys are for, and it's locked, and nobody knows whose it was, or where the keys are or anything. And I had this guy listening just say, if you open the top drawer of these cabinets, sometimes the keys are right there. And I just, like, I've been doing this for months, and it's just like the most obvious, like, bare, I just really was shocked, and I just had this like moment of like, does he think I didn't do that? Does he think I'm that stupid? I genuinely felt so stupid because I felt that he thought that I'm that stupid. How do you ask something like that without the implication being that I don't think you did that? I don't think it ever occurred to your little, female brain to open a cabinet to see if the keys for that cabinet are inside that cabinet. You know what I mean? It just was shocking, and I genuinely didn't know what to say. And so it's just stuff like that. It's just like we get questioned for everything all the time, everywhere. And so it's just this tired. I feel tired having to explain it. And then a lot of times you see this with Jacob Hansen, actually, like men are asking questions because like they do know, but they don't want to. And they're doing it to be a troll, or they're doing it because they know like you might have trouble expressing it, or if you do, that they want to push back on it. But instead of just coming out of the gate and being like, emotional labor is not a thing, this or that or whatever, they'll come at it like, what is emotional labor? And then they'll try to push back like that, and they try to sound innocent. But then like Jacob Hansen does it all the time. How many times has he asked the same kind of question to people over and over, and it's not sincere. It's not sincere, that he's just being a troll when he's doing it. But we don't always know if there's a new person in our comments saying something like, are you just trying to set me up for a conversation where I'm wasting my time because you're not interested at all? Or again, even if it is somebody sincere, you have the ability to look things up. And women are talking about this all over the place. So like you can find out, you can learn. Anyway, yeah.
I hear you, and as you are aware, I'm in an awkward position lately with Jacob Hansen, because he did come on my show and he was polite to me, and we had a very good conversation, and we both pretty much stated to each other, by the way, I don't like you and I don't like what you have to say. I don't like the things you think. No, I was actually surprised how similarly we did think about some things that I didn't realize, but I do think that there's a lot about toxic masculinity that I see just specifically on his channel. And one of the conversations I had that just kept coming up to me, and I'm like, oh, this would be a good example of this, but it's not time to bring it up. And it came up like 3 times, so I'm just going to say it. There's this conversation he had with a woman who's, I'm trying to remember her name. I don't know why I can't think of her name. But she was a sex therapist and sex educator.
Julie Hanks.
No, it was a woman who was actually on his show.
Oh. Oh,
Yeah,
I
but
don't know her name.
Julie,
Okay.
I don't think Julie
He's the
Hanks will
one
ever
that,
do
that
his.
he had her on to rebut Julie because everyone was going after him for
Right.
being
I
weirdly
think
obsessed with
so.
her. So he did the thing.
Yeah.
He's like, I'll get myself a female megaphone to say the same things that I was going to say anyway.
But this woman, she had it was about liberal values versus conservative values and family values. They were talking about this particular point. So, but he had said to her, like, what are sexual morals, basically? What's sexual morality if there's no objective morality? And she was explaining it, from her perspective. And I feel like not just looking at him and listening to him, I could see nothing was landing. It's like she's talking to you, she's saying something
A
to you,
wall.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and it may just be that he was just more focused on what he was going to say next or whatever, and I'm like, she's saying it out loud, but she's saying it. Oftentimes, we all speak with coded language, right? I think. But one of the things was sex work is basically what he brought up. He's like, you can agree, we can all agree that sex work is wrong. And she was like, I don't think we can agree with that. And it's like, the sex work is work, basically is the position she was taking.
Mhm.
And he said, but you wouldn't want your daughter doing that, for example. And that's how you know right away off the top. You wouldn't be happy if you found out your daughter worked in sex work. And she said, she basically, I wish I could remember the exact words, but she basically said, a lot of men don't realize how many women are only married to men because they need them they have an economic need from them, and they stay married to them for economic needs. And I'm like, that's so coded, it's not gonna land. And sure enough,
Right.
I felt like if he
Yeah. He
heard it,
didn't see like
it went right
that.
by
You're
him.
like your wife is that's a sex worker in a way. Yeah.
Sex work is work, right? It's like, what's the, and it's like, that's the
It's
point
just a
where
different
if
transaction. It's just that, yeah. And I've thought that too. I mean, ultimately, that's what wives are for either sexual objects for their husband. The difference is whether it's okay to have one woman be used by many men or one woman this is just mine. This is my personal one that's fresh out of the pack. That's where the purity comes in. It's fresh out of the package, brand new, unused. It's my sex toy and nobody
Hmm,
else's. That's really where we're at.
that's
And
a
the
good
thing is,
point.
and again, it's always wild to me when people like Jacob. I mean, maybe he's not seeing sex workers. Maybe he is. If he is, he'd be keeping them secret, just like every other conservative religious man who uses prostitutes and picks up women and then goes to church on Sunday, and stands at the pulpit, and or passes sacrament or teaches seminary. That's so many, especially like in Utah, so many sex workers have Mormon clients, and it's just this hidden part of the thing. And the whole thing with this morality and objective morals and whatnot, just the fact is that, I mean, a lot of these purity type cultures really feed into sex work and pornography. Like they really heighten it. They heighten its use. They heighten the shame around it and the chances that, yeah, that these things happen. So it's just always ironic to me, again, that there's this supposed moral high ground when the cause of it, I think a lot of it can be pointed directly to the culture that's shaming it. So
And that
yeah.
it's and yes, I agree. And the sexual morality thing is such an interesting high ground for them to claim, for religious people to claim, especially when they have these hardline stances on that, well, it's sex work that is morally wrong, when
Right.
it's like, or it's homosexuality that's wrong, or it's being trans or transgender, or these various aspects of being transgender. And I'm like listening to it, and I'm like, and yet every person I know who is homosexual, who is transgender, who is part of a marginalized community when it comes to sexuality and or gender identity, is a crusader, frankly, for consent.
Yeah.
And no, almost no conservatives I know are. And frankly, most of the firebrand apologists out there are frankly anti-consent. I
Yes.
mean, and it's like that whole conversation. They. It sounds like we're having like this. Is being a trad wife a kind of sex work? it sounds like we're talking about prostitution, but what we're talking about is consent. We're talking, when is sex work? When is sex not sex work? When it's the sex you want to have and it's gratifying to you. If
And
it's not
for yeah,
gratifying,
and for a lot of trad wives, they don't want to have it, and it's not gratifying for them.
right? And so why do they do it?
It's a
This
transaction.
is it's transactional. Exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
And it's like, and if that's a kink for somebody to be transactional, it's like, oh, I will give you this and you will give me that, and then they go, oh, that turns me on. Actually, great,
Yeah.
good, power to you.
I would
But
say
if
for
it,
most women, they don't though, and it's very, I think, sad and demoralizing for a lot of women in traditional marriages.
yep, yep.
Honestly, yeah.
And that if we were having more conversations, one of the values of the Church of Korihor is body and sex positivity. And Sam Nieves called me out. I mentioned this in my interview with him this week, that he called me out and he's like, I feel like this is not inclusive of asexual people. And I went, oh crap, good call. And I'm like, what should it be? And then he's like, I would wish you would consider language like this. And I said, yeah, go check it now. You're absolutely right. Beautiful thing about a church with no revelations is easy updates.
I didn't know that was kind of the issue it was over, which I appreciate as an asexual person. So
Oh, I didn't know you were asexual.
Oh yeah,
So,
yeah. I identify as ace. Yeah. I've never had sex, and I'm especially not interested in it now, considering the current climate. Because if I was, I would be more like male leaning. If I were to just try it, just to try it. But yeah, no, it's really quite frightening these days. But yeah, that's how I identify. And what's funny, like the church is so bad at teaching consent that when I finally realized this part of myself, I was still in the church, I wasn't quite out, but I did think like, boy, if I date other people, um I don't I well no this is so I did know I was ace, but then I did eventually leave the church. And then when I was thinking about dating after having left, I had thought like, well, if I'm not Mormon anymore, I just lost my best excuse to say no to sex. Like what am I going to replace that with? And it actually took me a little bit. It didn't actually dawn on me for, I don't know. I don't know if it was a couple days or a couple weeks that like, I finally, I don't know, this feeling of bodily autonomy, it's something, again, this is a privilege that men just have. So I think they don't know what it feels like because they don't know what it's like not to have it. Whereas I know what it's like not to have it, and then finally get it and feel like, and anyway, it was just a realization one day that my body is mine and I get to decide what I want to do with it. And I don't need a reason, a good reason, a good enough reason, anything at all to tell anyone for not wanting to have sex other than I don't want to. And it was just an amazing, like, positive, happy feeling for me to be like, yeah, like, and if they don't like it, that's okay. I know people have needs, and if I'm not going to meet that, that's fine, and they can make that decision. I'm not going to force my asexuality onto anyone else, just as I don't want their sexuality, forced onto me. But it just was so freeing to be like, I can say no, and I don't have to say why, because it's just I don't want to, and I'm not going to, because I'm in charge of my body and nobody else is entitled to it. So yeah, it was just really great to feel. So yeah. And I think that's why again, this is not something, I mean, this kind of freedom is not in traditional cultures. I'm supposed to marry. And as Mormonism is all about marriage and family. And I love family. I love kids. I love helping out other people's kids. But there was never a place for me in Mormonism without ultimately giving up an important part of myself, and like feeling really sad about that. It was genuinely a burden to me to think about marriage and to think about sex, and that I would have to do it. And I would think about, women throughout all time have been having sex that they don't want, with husbands that they love or don't, it's just, it's just kind of how it is. And then it felt really sad that was like the idea of trying to accept it like that and just be like, yeah, every woman has to do it. And so do I. That was a really depressing thought and a really depressing time, honestly.
Is there any safe experience for ace people inside Mormonism or Mormonism adjacent religious experiences?
Not really. Like, I mean, staying single, but like, I don't know, as far as safe goes, I mean, you're not supposed to be, you'll be seen as a spinster, so you're always less than as a single person. Um, but so ace people can have sex, and some can even enjoy it. They just might not be the starter of it, you know. And so that was another thing I think too, because it was unknown for me. I just had dread for it. That was all I felt. But you know, maybe it would be fine, and maybe I would like it. But um yeah, I think sometimes ace people have accidentally married other ace, just, you know, by chance, and then they've been happily having however little sex they have, you know, however many times a year, and then that serves them, and they maybe had their kids from, you know, those one, you know, those few times, and it's really only by accident, I think, that you know, can kind of get through like that, or you stay single. But I didn't know that I was ace early on, because again, it's hard to notice a lack of something. And I did have huge like romantic crushes when I was in high school, but those were all very, I think, juvenile. They were very Disney. It was the puppy kind of crush, where it's just like, I want to be with them everywhere where they are. I'm just happier they're around. That kind of a thing, you know? Like, and if you're gonna live life and you have to buy groceries anyway, then like buy groceries with this guy, or you know. And you know, everyone has to go to sleep at night, so I'm sleeping with this guy. But it was never for me sexual. So when I did learn about asexuality, at first I thought that that didn't apply to me, because of they were intense. I would leave my like math textbook in class, because I knew that, you know, my crush had the same math class later. And you know, I knew I couldn't do it too many times or it would be obvious, but I would, you know, maybe every other month or so leave my book there, so I could just happen in sixth period to go back and be like, oopsie, I forgot my book, you know. And go in and just to see the guy, like that level of stupid, you know, like planning, you know, that kind of stuff. But if you had asked me then, like, if you were not Mormon and there was no restriction, you know, as far as any sexual activity, would you want to have sex with that person? When it was, you know, when I thought of it that way, I was like, oh no, I would not want to, even without the Mormonism. And that's when it finally clicked, like, oh, okay, like these are different things, and I'm really not interested. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to hear that, because like I said, I am trying to challenge myself and to discover where I am still being toxic. And this, you know, my relationship to asexuality is one of those places, because like even on the website of the Church of Korihor, one of the things I put in there, and it occurred to me when I put it on there, I'm like, oh, this is not right somehow. But oh well, I'll change it later if I find it. And it was this it was the phrase, Korihors want to have consensual sex and lots of it. And that was what
yeah,
Sam called me out on. And he's like, fun energy, cool, not inclusive of asexual people.
I want everybody to have as much consensual sex as they want.
Right. Yeah.
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 Which for
And
me
that's what
is
we were.
none. But for other people it's a lot, and I want them for that. Like, I want that for them too. I It really bothers me, and I do genuinely feel sad for people who are sexually incompatible, and are not getting their needs met. You know, I feel sad for them, and I want them to have like the connection that they need when they need it. So, yeah. and
And
and that's been a bit of a journey for me too, because I did start off, you know, being quite repulsed by sex, and I've come a long way to be a lot more um sex positive. There's still things that, like, and I'm not as naive as I used to be. There's still things I hear sometimes that confuse me, and I'm just like, do I want to know, do I want to ask, or will I regret looking it up? And like, you know, for me, I mean, like, pornography, I really can't stand it. I really do not like to see genitalia like up in my, and that's all like porn is. It's just right in your face. And so like I don't care for that. But a romantic scene in a movie that's, you know, a lot more demure and covered up, I do connect with that a lot, because it's more emotional, I think, connection kind of thing. And that I can relate to, even though like it still might be a sex scene, but again, just because it's more, you know, PG-13 rated than X rated. I do like stuff like that, especially if it fits the story and it's not just, for sex sake or whatever. Anyway, but yeah, I used to find almost any aspect of it really repulsive. I used to think anything, especially, I mean, even missionary, I didn't like the idea of, but certainly anything out of that, due to my Mormon upbringing, I thought of some kind of like deviancy and like really gross. Like, why would anyone do that? And I've learned to accept that, like, I do still think it's gross as far as I'm concerned, and it's not something that I want to do or somebody to do to me. But a lot of people like it. It's quite normal, and if they're having a good time, I want it to be safe. I want it to be fun. I want it to be, clean, good times. So yeah, that's been a journey myself.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's in terms of just calling out our own toxicity when it happens on this particular issue. I look at it and I think that there's something to say for the standpoint that I'm going at it from. If we're going to talk about the morals of sexuality, it's while you have the God groups are always going to be about the act and the thoughts,
Yeah.
and whereas the rest of us, I'm feeling like I'm looking at things like consent over naturalistic, and I feel like inside of the progressive movement, and ex-Mormons inclusive, one of the toxic things is to say phrases like, and things like, it's natural, it's only natural, it happens to everybody, has the urge to do it, and it's just fine. And it's like, okay, not true. There are people from all sides of the spectrum. And two, even if there is more nurture than nature in somebody's sexuality, whatever that might be, whether they're ace or they're demi or they're gay or they're straight or however, even if it's some trauma happened to them or something about their
Right.
upbringing, shaped this, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because it's like,
No.
this is where they are.
Yeah.
And so it does, how much of it is nature versus nurture? Who gives a shit? I talked to a woman who was a neuroscientist about this. She's when I was doing my documentary, Never Finished, about Mormons and sex, and she was one of the researchers who proved that porn addiction wasn't real. And we had a great conversation, a great interview. I'm like, you're not saying that people don't have obsessive or don't have compulsive relationships with sex? She's like, no, nobody's arguing that. And I was like, okay, good. I'm like, I think we always agree with that. In that case, I think we totally agree. But I asked her, I said, what do you think as a neuroscientist about this question about, is it, nurture nature when it comes to people being gay or people being demi or people being, any various side of sexuality? And she said, in the neuroscientific community, she said, in the religious community, we get that you guys are still having that issue.
Yeah.
She said, but in the neuroscience community, it's a stupid question now.
Right.
She's like, we don't care. Who cares? And she's like, wherever you are is where you are.
Right. And
And
some people, so a lot of people, this is something that I heard from Natasha Helfer Parker, sorry, not the Parker, Natasha Helfer, is that, in her practice, a lot of women come in thinking that they're asexual, and it's because they're having bad sex in their marriages, and because they're not enjoying it and they don't want to do it, that's where they're thinking it. And so it's through the therapy that when they actually can feel less shame about themselves. And I went through this too, because once I started to realize that there really was something different about me and my lack of interest, it wasn't just that, like, I'm really good at chastity, which is what I thought for a very long time. I just thought, like, I'm really good at this. I'm not as tempted as other people my age have been. But once I got to the point where I was like, I think something's different, and I think I really should be tempted by now. I should have been tempted a lot by now. For me, that was one of the things I went to. Is it a purity culture thing? Did I make myself scared of it? And so I started to learn more about it there, and it was good, but didn't make me any more wanting to do it. Like it was never there for me. And so, yeah, so there's quite a few women who might say, but the thing is, even if they're not really ace, but they're feeling it takes therapy to work out, and they need to work it out themselves to be able to, tap into that, to start to feel like a sexual being. And it's not something that anyone can tell them to do. Like, and if I'm not ace, no one can help me figure that out but me, and I'll figure it out myself. And even if so, I'm open to the idea. I think it's extremely unlikely, but I'm open to the idea of finding a partner someday, and possibly even a sexual one. But it's if that happens, I will still consider myself ace. I'll just have found like my one person who happens to be like compatible with me in this extremely like narrow area. Or even if I'm sexually open to this person, it will be the first time in my life that I've wanted to. So that would still follow under the umbrella of ace anyway, just because it's not a universal experience for me. Anyway, I think it's unlikely, but I am open to it, and that's my business, so it doesn't prove anybody else right. Like if that does happen, it doesn't change anything about me, or that I was wrong about me all the rest of this time. I am right about me. I can say that right now. And I'll be right about me then too, if that were to happen. So yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I love that you said
I
that.
wanted to point actually something else out too, just about the consent thing. Again, I'm going to reference the Denmark documentary Faith, Hope, Rape. This was something, I don't know if it's in the documentary, but it did come up in our interview, that this man, the documentary is about a man who was similar to the French case that's hitting headlines right now. I think the verdict was just given on that. It involves a man repeatedly drugging his wife to have sex with her, and the French case is more involved than that because there were a lot more people. But the Denmark case was just a Mormon man doing this to his wife. So he could assault her at night. And it came out that before marriage, so when they first told the church about it, the only discipline this man received was a disfellowshipment for a year. So he wasn't allowed to speak in sacrament or pray, or teach any lessons like that. No public speaking in the church, more or less. And that was it. But he was still allowed to come and participate in everything. And this is for like systemically, repeatedly raping his wife, drugging her first and then raping her. But he had, I guess, before his marriage, consensual sex, and was excommunicated for it. And he had to repent and come back and be rebaptized. And to me, I think that shows ultimately like I guess the evil to me and the religious view of things, versus the, liberal view on consent. The fact that a consensual encounter between two people that wanted it is something that's excommunication worthy, but multiple drugging and raping of your wife is, you get a slap on the hand for it. Ultimately, that's, I think, the issue with religion, and their view and dislike for consent, honestly, because consent involves no just as much as yes, and they're so focused on not wanting to give the yes that they don't care that the no's aren't given either, and aren't respected. So yeah.
And consistently given, and in every moment, because one of the I've never seen Mormons get more triggered than on the topic of enthusiastic consent, which is, I have always understood it to mean, and I'd welcome you or anybody else to correct me on this, is that not only does a person have to agree to the sex act, if whatever it is, but they have to continue to agree at any point in time and have the ability to stop it and say nope,
Right.
or and to communicate effectively with and know with confidence that the other person isn't going to go, I don't know, you said yes back then, so that meant I could do whatever I wanted, and just continue to do it. And it's like, you see these people get, for me it goes down to the same thing. I don't know if you remember, there was this group called Men Rain, or some men in this BS, and they had they were planning a big protest or a big demonstration at the Provo Temple of the Mormon Church. This is like 10 years ago, and
Okay.
they were planning a demonstration. They were going to meet at the temple in solidarity together to say, to protest with signs, basically, and what their message was, that it's not, that there needed to be a law that says that a man can't be accused of assault if it happens inside their own house, whoever the inside the house.
Yeah, fuck that.
And I was like, okay, we can't even agree that I wouldn't even agree with this idea that a lot of people have, that you can't assault your wife. It's not possible to assault your wife,
because, and that's a property thing. You can't assault what's your property and what's your sex toy, basically, is how it's seen. I think it was only in 1996 that it became like legal, like federally, that marital rape was even like put on the books as a crime, because a lot of people just don't see it that way. They just see it, as part of wifely duty. And if you're refusing and your husband has to get violent with you, that's just 1996. Like 1996 is when that law, or if not 96, maybe 93, but in the 1990s, like that's how long it took for us to get there. And I'm really worried that we're really backtracking a lot of things.
Excellent.
So yeah, it's kind of scary to look at. But anyway,
I became, yeah. Sorry, this has gone on for a while now. I'll just mention this real quick.
I think.
Yeah, maybe. Well, this is I've said publicly now, and I'm sure you probably heard me say this. People may get sick of me saying this, but I've been an ethical non-monogamous for a while, and I was dating actually somebody at the time when Utah retracted the law that criminalized adultery. And so technically, bring on the law.
Yeah.
And I said to a partner of mine, I'm like, can you believe they just barely passed that? And this partner, who is a very progressive person, looked at me and said, I'm actually kind of disappointed, because it was more fun for me when we were breaking the law. Anyways, I've taken up 2 hours of your time, Maven. I am so appreciative, because I do feel like I've learned a lot about performative, performative allyship. And you've given me a lot to think about, not only about my behavior, but about what I could be communicating more effectively in person, especially with other men, and what I could be communicating more effectively in the Church of Korihor. So I mean, I've gotten a lot out of this. So I want to honor your journey.
I hope so. Thank you.
And I want to thank you for being willing to be vulnerable, because you've done a lot of that. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on.